Hello, I'm Pamela Davis. Welcome to episode 127 of the Well Done Life podcast. Hello, and welcome back to episode 127 of the Well Done Life podcast. I'm your host, Pamela Davis. If you are new here, hey, how are you? Welcome. If you've been here before, you guys know the deal. I love you deep, and I am just so glad that you are here with me again this week. So before we get started, I like to make sure that we set the foundation. I want to make sure that you understand that in this space, this safe space that we are creating, that there are two very important foundations that everything we do will be based on. And those are primarily clarity and love. With clarity, it's really straightforward. I just want to make sure that you understand that I created the Well Done Life podcast because I believe women are the foundation of society. I believe that we need spaces where we can just be, where we can just share our stories, where we can learn and grow together. So that is one of the main reasons that I created the Well Done Life. I wanted to cultivate that space because I think there is healing and growth and just so many wonderful things built through our conversation. So welcome. And then that leads me into my other favorite thing, my other foundational thing, and that is love. Love is going to be the root at everything that we do here. Everything we do will be based in love. I want you to feel loved when you're in this space from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet. I want you to know that you are supported, that you are not alone, and that you understand that some of the things that you are experiencing right now, they've been done before. And you'll see that a lot of us survived. And hopefully that's a catalyst to remind you that if you keep going, there's great things on the other side of it, and that you can learn from our mistakes. You can be better than us. Yes, this is a space where women want to see other women win. That is something that we will always do. We will always be the cheerleaders for each other. So now that you understand what this space is all about, that it is built on clarity and love, I want to make sure that we start to wind our way into this week's episode. It is definitely a very unique day that I am recording on. I'm recording on Tuesday, September the 27th, and it is approximately 9:36 p.m. And it has been a day, y'all. I live in Florida. And yes, if you are listening to this on Sunday, I will be past Hurricane Ian, but right now I'm in the midst and preparation for it, and it's driving me crazy. And so we are just like trying to survive, trying to get through the hurricane prep, trying to ride it out. So this is just the beginning, but I am so glad that we were able to pull this together because this week, this day, life was lifing, and it was close, y'all. It was close. Like, I didn't know if it was going to happen today, but we made it. We are here. We are still in the Fall into Self series, and we have the final episode. And I am so excited, but at the same time, really sad. Before we kind of dive into that final episode, though, and I'm skipping something. I know better than that. Lord, forgive me, y'all. If you've listened to me before, you know that I always like to make sure that I start this with prayers because I want to make sure that a part of you feeling loved is the fact that you know that you are prayed for. And especially, like I said, when we're getting ready to go through a hurricane, I definitely need to make sure that I'm praying for folks. So let me back that thing up just a little bit and send out some prayers. I want to send out prayers of peace to everybody. I want you to have peace in your spirit this week. I want you to feel at ease, at rest. I also want you to feel that you are able to share your love, share your voice with other people, that you don't feel afraid or embarrassed or scared or upset to let people know how much you love them, how much you care about them, because life is short. And we want to make sure that we are sharing our most authentic self, our voice, knowing that you are always going to be able to share that side of yourself without having to worry about someone taking advantage of you, knowing that you are blessed with the power of discernment and that you will always be protected. Be your most authentic self and let people know how you feel about about them. I also want you to have prayers of abundance because, again, I want you to be surrounded in abundance. And I always like to talk about this lately. It's been on my spirit. It's not a matter of just financial abundance. That's a given. I want y'all to be blessed financially so you can be a blessing to other people. But I also want you to be abundantly rich in your spirit. I want you to feel so good about yourself that it just radiates from the inside of you so that other people can be blessed by that as well. Because there is power in our healing. There is power in our happiness and in our peace. And when we are at that level of peace and happiness, it radiates off us and it inspires other people to seek it out as well. And so it can be a blessing to others. So I want you to have that. I want you to feel so peaceful that it just glows off of you. So those are my main prayers for you this week. And actually, also, I want you to be healthy in your mind and in your body, mentally and physically, because it is important. We always focus so much on our health, but I do want you to feel healthy in your spirit. Things will try you. Things will challenge you. Setbacks can hurt you and loss. It's just, tough things that happen. We do have to understand that we are not alone. And that no matter how much it feels like it, there is always someone here that is going to care for you. And if you ever need to reach out to me, I've had people do it, and you just want someone to talk to, just someone to encourage you, don't forget, hit me in the DM, hit me an email. I will be more than happy to pour into you because I remember those days myself when I felt so low that I needed someone to pour into me. And it was amazing how sometimes God would bring people who I wasn't even connected to into my space at that particular moment in time to be able to say something to me that could just turn my spirit around. So I want you to know that if you need someone to turn your spirit around, I'm with you, we're with you, and we love you. So now I feel like I have properly set the foundation. I have properly made sure that hopefully you feel loved and protected. So let's kind of start to talk about the Fall into Self series. Last week, episode 126, which was Self-Love Real Talk. I really want to thank everybody for their support and encouragement of the episode. I was so happy to be able to regroup with those queens again. Like I said, it wasn't the full crew from part one, but it was perfection in the group that we had, because I know from talking to each of those ladies, each of them are at a phase in their life where they know now how much they love themselves. And that is such an important thing for us as women. We have to know that we love each other, that we love ourselves, because when we love ourselves, it is a blessing to ourselves, but it's also, like I said, it's a blessing to others because we are abundant in our soul and our spirit. All those things I was talking about in prayer is what happens and comes through when you love yourself. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that conversation, because it was a good one, I'll make sure that I link it in the show notes. But this week we are, like I said, winding down the Fall into Self series. And we decided that we needed to go back and talk a little bit more about generational trauma. So this is generational trauma part 2. And it's not as heavy as part 1. Part 1 was tough. We laid out some of the traumas that we've experienced and how they've impacted our lives. But we're here to tell you that by laying those out, there's healing on that. And you have to confront, what you're trying to heal. In the words of the great philosopher Sean Carter, better known as Jay-Z, you can't heal what you don't reveal. So this is our opportunity to show you some of the healing. It's not all the healing, but we gave you some of the trauma and some of the benefits of our healing so that you can see that it is worth the investment to do some of those inner child work, to address some of the traumas that are in your family so that you can break those generational bonds, those generational ties and curses, as they say, that may be holding you back from your next level. So I am very honored to be able to share this second episode with you. And I am also wanting to send out a special shout out to my co-host for the series, Crissy Diaz. I just want to thank her for the vision, because she's the one who came to me with this thought of doing the Fall into Self series. And I have been so blessed for this time that I have spent with her. And I will definitely be having her back because hint, hint again, my dear, I need to have you on the show so we can wrap this up right in a bow together, which we will do. But this is our last episode essentially in the series, but it won't be our last opportunity collaborating. And I just hope that if you are listening to it, if you have listened to the series, that you are in some way elevated, that you are in some way healed and ready and open for your next level. So I hope that you will enjoy this conversation about generational trauma, healing, and grief, because we had to add another layer because there are many layers on the healing journey. So if you will sit back, relax, grab a blanket, grab a drink, we will be with you in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, everyone. It's your girl, Crissy D. I'm so excited to be here to speak on generational trauma, pain, and healing, along with grief. I missed the first conversation, but I listened to it and it was really, really, really deep. So I'm excited to expand on that a little bit more. So first, I'm going to start with Christina, if you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll go to Valerie.
Hi, I'm Christina Rendawa. I'm excited to also talk about generational trauma and grief. I'm just a stay-at-home wife right now, just doing my soft life thing right now.
I'm Valerie Moses, also really excited to get to talk to you all tonight and get to just discuss this topic a little bit further. It was so powerful the first time around, and I think really diving a little deeper. I work full-time in PR and community relations in Central Florida, and by night or weekend or really whenever I'm not at my job, I'm a podcaster, the Wellness and Wanderlust podcast. So happy to be here and to get to hear a little bit more of these ladies' stories and get to share a little of my own too.
All right. Well, I'm just going to kick it off with a little background of my generational trauma since I missed the first conversation. But I did take some notes from the previous chat that you ladies had on this. And it seemed like a lot of you were talking about, it seemed like the common denominator amongst all the women was like a mother's love, whether it was lacking or you just felt like maybe it was not lacking, but it still wasn't the best relationship to have with what you would think your mom. So I wanted to just go over a little bit of my history with my mom, who passed away last September. But I was raised by my dad. My mom and dad married, and then 2 years later had me, and then my mom got addicted to drugs. And so my parents divorced and my dad got custody of me. So my dad's Puerto Rican, my mom is Black. And so I never really felt like I fit in with my family because I wasn't Puerto Rican enough, but I wasn't Black enough either. So I definitely feel like that caused a lot of pain in my childhood and just feeling like I don't belong in any group. So I kind of just tried to make my own friend group, family group out of friends. But one thing that I noticed as I got older and dealing with my mom was that I tried really hard to be a daughter to her, but I didn't really know how to be a daughter to her. Like I knew how to be a daughter to my dad because he raised me, but to be a daughter to a woman, I felt like was a little bit different. She was a little bit more needier than my dad. So with her passing, pulling in the grief part of it, I actually felt a huge weight off of me because I felt like I didn't have to be something that I didn't know how to be and quite frankly didn't really want to be. Because after about 30 years of not having a relationship with someone, it's kind of like, you're asking a lot of me when I don't really know how to be this person to you. So do either of you ladies feel that there is a parallel between grief and generational trauma in your life? Pam?
I had to think about it. And not in the sense that I had to think about it because it's not, I guess, 100% directly related to me. But I would think that, yes, in reference to like my dad, his generational traumas that he grew up with, because his mother died very young. But like I told you guys before, his mother, she was essentially the other woman in his father's life. And his father had his whole separate family and everything like that. And so my grandmother bore the brunt of that stigma during that time. And it impacted, I feel, like how he was raised. And luckily, not in the negative, meaning he was able to love on us in the way that he would have wished he had with his father. And it taught him an incredible amount of respect for women, because I will say that. So I'm blessed in regards to it. But then the flip of that is that it impacted our family because it made our family incredibly small. So like when my father passed away suddenly, I wanted to fulfill like some of his wishes. So one of the things that I knew that he always probably would want to do, or what I felt led to do, was to take his ashes, because he was cremated, and unite them with his mother. And his mother, unfortunately, like she didn't even have a gravestone. They just left a grave marker for her. And actually, I have the grave marker up in my house because that is the only thing that I have of her, to tell me who she is. Like, I don't even know her birthday. It's that deep. And so when I went, I had to like utilize family to help me. And it wasn't his family because his mother's side of the family, because the relationship unfortunately is a little strained there. But I went to my father's side, or his brother, and his brother and my dad looked like identical twins. So there was definitely no denying it. Like if I looking at him was like a dagger in the heart when I looked at my uncle, because I'm like, you look just like my father, like literally. And so he's talking to me, and we sat down and we all had a conversation. And one of the ramifications of the trauma is that we are not going to have a relationship. We are just not going to have a relationship. And it was a very adult conversation, but to imagine being in the presence of your uncle and he's telling you, I can't have a relationship really with you, not unless you're going to be the one doing all the work, because I'm still carrying trauma from what my father did to my mother by having an affair with your father's mother and separating our family. And as I understood more of the story and heard it, I understood his pain. I mean, it's disrespect, but it ultimately just breaks the family. Like there's no way that I can rely on you moving forward. You know what I mean? Not unless I'm willing to acquiesce my pride in order to cultivate a relationship with you. And I'm like, I'm really not that interested, not to be crass. I love you. I do, because he helped me when nobody else would help me. But again, it shows how the generational trauma just like it eats through year after year. And all these people are gone. My grandfather is gone. My dad now is gone. But there's still no way for healing in their mind, because unfortunately that generational trauma never got addressed, with the fact that there was disrespect toward his mother, and he blamed my father for that, and in turn blames us for that. And so, yes, I would say through that situation, that's actually what exposed me to how traumatic or how deep our trauma ran, especially on that side, was through his death. Yes. So I would say yes. That's why I had to dig deep, but that is really where it began for our family, like that.
Yeah, this is like a therapy session. You know, it might start small. You might think you don't have anything, and the minute you start talking about it, it comes.
Yeah, just unpacks.
But I've noticed, though, real quick, just something that I wrote down that I thought was funny, but not really funny. Like when you break up with someone, you do the breakup lie, it's me, not you. But it seems like with the trauma, it's you, not me.
Yes.
Like a lot of the times people are just like, I can't with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Valerie?
Yeah, I would say for me, it has shaped definitely how I deal with the challenges that come up later in my life. I spoke about it a little bit on the previous episode, but I come from close knit family, but there's a lot of enmeshment and the just how deep the ties are and some of the ways the relationships are on the sides that are, for those of us who are very close. Not everybody is, but in terms of our core family unit. And it shaped the way that I deal with so much and some of the things that I've accepted in relationships, especially having been in a couple of toxic, verbally, mentally abusive relationships. I wouldn't say I blame my parents necessarily, but at the same time, a lot of what I learned to accept based on growing up and being that peacemaker in certain situations or being, sometimes the caretaker role or almost a third parent type of role and being consulted for very adult things at a very young age at a time when you want to process your own emotions. Like 13 is, I feel like it's the worst age for everybody, no matter what you're going through. Like middle school is its own trauma in a sense, but in all actuality, wanting to deal with that on my own, but then having to kind of be that caretaker and be that, you hear about the strong friend, but being the strong relative, being the one that kind of, brought everyone together or got everyone talking at times. It's difficult for me now as kind of a highly sensitive person and absorbing the energy of whatever's going on in the room and taking it on throughout my day and letting it really affect me personally. It's allowed me to, I think, accept things that I probably shouldn't as an adult. And I'm having to recognize that now. And then I think seeing some of the wounds as I've gotten older in really a lot of my family members and realizing that, hey, the thing that I thought that this person was responsible for, well, now I see how their parent did that to them and how, it's an even worse version of that. And so kind of recognizing that. And so giving a little bit of the grace where I can, which can be hard sometimes. And also recognizing like one of the things that, kind of a pattern in my life is that I like to take on sometimes the lost soul of a person when they don't always necessarily deserve my energy or, whatever it is that I'm doing for them, but I will happily, take them on and take on whatever project that is. And as I've gotten older, I've realized it's because I saw my dad doing it my whole life. And while he's a great role model at the same time. And I don't know what wound it was that maybe led to that for him, but recognizing that, hey, a lot of what I saw growing up and what I thought was expected in you and what you were supposed to do for others maybe isn't what's actually needed, especially if you want to, take care of yourself and kind of fill your own cup. So recognizing that as I get older for sure, but especially taking on the lost souls that maybe don't need it and giving those multiple chances to people for things that they don't necessarily deserve it for, because I was expected to be that person that forgave and helped and gave whatever guidance, even at 12, 13 years old. So that would be kind of how it's shaped me and even just the way I deal with challenges and grief at this point in my life.
Okay. All right. Christina, anything?
Well, both of my parents faced great abandonment issues. I talked about my mom in foster care and how traumatic that was for her and how I saw how it made her who she is. And with my father, he had semi-abandonment issues. My grandmother left him in their hometown with my grandfather when he was in high school. She fled for abuse reasons, and she fled with the two youngest and left him and my aunt, who are the oldest, to finish school and do their own thing. My dad was a mama's boy. So, and my grandfather, I think just like women have hard relationships with their mothers, men have hard relationships with their fathers. And man, my grandfather was giving my father hell. And it was just so unfair. It was abusive. And eventually my father followed my grandmother to the city she moved to. But I think that shapes that childhood, trauma, the things you see, it really shapes you. And, it caused my mother to I don't want to say abandon, but she did. She gave up custody very easily to my dad so she could go and just be who she was. And my dad, he did the best he could, with my stepmom and I. He was really good with me one-on-one, but when it came to that family unit, there was a lot of issues there. And I just think my parents dealing with abandonment shaped how they parented me. And it led me to kind of semi being abandoned myself. So now it passed that abandonment down to me. And I don't think they meant to do that, and they probably tried so hard not to, and don't think they did, like, what? I did that, but in my mind, I'm like, yeah, you can't, if you don't get help or recognize something's an issue, you don't fix it. And it just seeps right on in. And so, when I talk about my childhood issues, I've noticed there's a pattern of abandonment, or I feel abandoned or not heard or listened to. Kids are seen and not heard, like, and when it comes to the grief aspect, now I may be misunderstanding grief when it comes to this aspect, because I've always looked at grief from a death standpoint, so I might be a little confused, but I know I find myself reflecting back a lot. I can't let go of some things. I talk about them a lot. I just keep reminiscing on things. I'm like, you got to let this go, girl. Like, who cares? Well, I care clearly, but, let it go. And I'm like, what is it? What is it? And I think I'm grieving what could have been. I feel like I'm not able to let go of who I could have been had I had the support, had I had I don't want to say love. My parents loved me, but man, had they just seen me a little more, it would have really boosted my confidence. And I just think the ways I wasn't seen and heard really tanked. I was that kid. I needed a lot of love. I needed to be pushed a little bit. Everybody don't need that, but I did. And had I had that little push and a little extra attention sometimes, I do think I would have turned out a much more successful person in many ways. And it would have prevented a lot of things that I had to figure out on my own. But I kind of grieve of what could have been based on how I was raised.
That makes complete sense. Like, I definitely understand combining what Valerie said and what you said, like, growing up with my dad and he remarried and they had kids. I was the parent, third parent, watching them spend my summers babysitting them while my friends were out having fun, traveling and doing what kids should do, playing outside. I was being the second mom, but then also I dealt with the abandonment because I was like, why doesn't my mom, want me? Or I remember waiting for her, to come pick me up or come to visit me and as a kid, and she never show up. So it was like, you have that, like, that feeling of like not feeling worthy. So I definitely understand all of those viewpoints. And yes, you can grieve you could grieve a death and also what you believe your childhood should have been, so that you could be the person that you think that you should be, but really you are who you are. And it's just going to make you a stronger person.
I have a quick question. Mm-hmm. I thought of this the last episode afterwards. If you came from a slightly toxic childhood or background, did you have a fantasy family in your head that you daydreamed about?
Hello, Beyonce's family. I want to be in my goals.
God. Whitney Houston was my mom, and we lived this sitcom life in my head. And so when I went to bed at night, this is how I fell asleep. I fell asleep with episodes I would run about how I wish my family looked. Like,
yes, I was on stage with Beyonce. We was doing a routine.
Yes. Okay. So I'm not the only one. No. And it may not be a toxic thing. Like, maybe it's just a fantasy thing kids do. But I know my fantasy had a structured family. Mm-hmm. And I can tell, that might have been directly related to like the trauma, man.
Right. But we don't know how we would have ended up if we had what we thought.
I had a whole WandaVision thing going on.
That's funny. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I didn't have a specific people in mind, but I remember there were all these shows growing up with like these kids, like the kid would be acting out. And then when the parents finally like investigated the situation, they're like, oh, it was because I didn't think you loved me or whatever. And then the parents were like, oh, but we do. And everything was great. And everybody like was wonderful. The kid got away with whatever. And anytime I tried that, my parents were like, you are so full of shit. Calm down. Like, you know, and they called me on it, of course. But I was like, God, I wish like, you know, these very understand, because we didn't talk about our emotions, and like maybe anger a little bit, but we didn't talk about our emotions in the sense like the way that these shows do, where there's like so much empathy for the kid and the kid is always right. I'm like, not here. And, you know, sometimes it was a little bit of an excuse for me to be a little bratty, but at the same time, you know, there was some of that too. Like, oh man, they're not going to let that slide, that, you know.
Right. Yeah. I feel like Pamela wants to say something.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I used to dream that this is probably the unpopular answer, but it's my generation. I used to think that I was living the Cosby life. I did. I would tell my parents, like, you guys are like Heathcliff and Claire, and we're middle class. And my mom and dad would be like, no, baby, we're middle class. Your mother and I are middle class. You are poor. You are poor. You have nothing. Whatever we give you is what you got. But we are that, like, and I used to imagine that we would have those scenarios where my parents would like do all those things. Like, remember when they took all of Theo's stuff out of his room and made him buy back like he had to pay rent now, he had to buy a bed. I used to long for that. The closest I got was my mom actually used to, anytime we would ask her for anything, she would play Shirley Caesar's No Charge. Like, she would be like, go get the tape. Like, anytime we would ask her for something, and like this gospel song will totally lay out why you should never ask your parent for anything, because of all the sacrifice that they have for bringing you in the world. It's like punishment. And I told her that when she passes away, I'm gonna play it at her funeral, because like literally that's how we grew up. We grew up on No Charge and stuff like that. And I used to want to have the Cosby life, where it was like, okay, let's just have these like little scenarios and we're middle class. So that just totally made me chuckle.
That is funny. That was a good question, Christy.
I was just curious. Like, I was like, was I the only one doing that? Or I had a fake mom. I had a fake whoever.
Girl. Yeah. You got to have a good imagination when you grow up in certain environments. But talking about parenting, I know none of us have children, and I don't know how anybody feels about having children. But I feel like there's this whole trend of like gentle parenting. And do you think that that's a part of the healing process when it comes to generational trauma? Like trying to not do what our parents did to us, because we were very much stay in a child's place. We couldn't be in the same room with adults, like adults conversations, nothing like that.
See, I think it is. I don't have kids, obviously, but I think it is. And I have to admit, my parents were not stay in the room. That they let us speak our mind with adults. And it's my mom likes to call it the gift and the curse, because she's like, it made me too, she felt like independent, but she loved it. And I like the fact that people are thinking of gentle parenting, because our parents were just doing the very best that they had. And if you identify there's an error, like I thank God my parents identified that how they were raised was not the gold standard. And they were like, no, we're going to do it totally different. So I like that it seems like this is something that's becoming more the pattern, because we have to be honest and say, like, everything wasn't perfect. And if there's ways that you can raise your child without having to physically beat them or berate them and create those traumas, why would you not do that?
Amen. Amen. I definitely agree with you on that.
I know. I feel like I hear so many people today that are like, well, we went through this and we turned out fine. So, and it's like, we did, but we didn't.
But did you?
Yeah. Like if you really want to be doing yeah. And it's funny because I started to pick up on it a little bit more too, as I got a little older. I was very fortunate. I grew up with all four grandparents until, my late 20s was when my grandmother passed away. And then my grandfather, about a year and a half ago, but I still have two grandparents that live, at an independent living right like the neighborhood literally next to my parents. And when my grandpa was around, he was also living in that neighborhood. So I saw more of like the parent-child interactions a little bit more, and especially with my dad and my grandpa, because I grew up, my dad, he was an airline pilot. And so for him, everything really did have to go a certain way. It had to, be perfect because people's lives were at stake. But at the same time, in our household, he could get angry. He could have, there were certain things with that critical voice in my head that, kind of did stem from him, where he's definitely softened as he's gotten older. But as we started to have these conversations, he's like, when I was growing up, nothing was good enough for my dad. And I'm thinking, I don't know, grandpa is grandpa, but I have a very different relationship with my grandfather, because grandparents in general, like, they want to love on their grandkids. It's a very different, it's not your child necessarily. So there's more of that. And once my grandfather moved in, I saw, oh, wow, he really is a lot more critical of my dad than of my uncle. And even though they're close, there are certain things where, wow, my dad is actually like, he's actually doing, and I realized this with both of my parents, with the things that, I've gotten upset with him, throughout my life. Like, they're doing the best they can. They are someone's child as well. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to accept certain behaviors, but I'm finding that, like, trying to forgive them for it a little bit more. For me, it's helping me more than maybe it helps them. But yeah, really, really seeing how those relationships are, and then seeing with my other grandparents living close by, and now seeing the relationship with my mom and realizing, wow, she is actually, trying her best, and is, and so for me, hoping to break some of those patterns a little bit more, really trying to do some of that work. But I think there's always a little bit that we bring with us, but I think this awareness and the fact that we are talking about generational trauma now, it wasn't something that, came up in our households necessarily 20, 30 years ago, but something that we're delving into a little bit more. I think it's causing us to hopefully be more conscious in how we raise our kids. Because there are now, granted, we all say, I'm never going to do this to my kids, and then something else. But I think it definitely has given me more of an awareness that I'd like to at least, bring to, if I end up having my own children.
That's awesome. And you definitely, even though this is helping you, I feel like it'll rub off on them.
Yeah.
Christina?
Well, I'm definitely going to implement gentle parenting when I have kids. I also have a special announcement. I am pregnant. And so I'm already having intrusive thoughts already about like how to protect them from this. And I'm like, oh gosh, like I'm going to have to really tell people, like, this is not what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. My husband and I, his family, not an issue. My family, I'm like, well, I live far, so I won't have to deal with it often. But, oh, man, I don't know. But I 100% believe in gentle parenting. It's a lot harder than it looks. But the way I break it down in my mind, it's understanding childhood development. I think a lot of us, the way we were raised and the way I see people who don't practice gentle parenting, they don't understand the necessary phase of life that their kid is in that matches their age range. And they kind of expect adult reactions out of kids when they give them adult instructions. And I'm like, well, their world doesn't work like that. They're tiny. Their brains are still forming. They see everything different. Everything is so extreme to them. So they're not using inside voices and screaming everywhere. It just doesn't make sense to them. So you have to have a certain level of patience to just keep repeating yourself and be gentle with them. Once again, it's hard because looking at people do it and doing it yourself is just, whew. I don't know if y'all around kids these days, they're small ones.
Girl.
But I had to help my mom with my cousin's kids. They were a little misplaced for a little while, so I had to help my mom with them and relieve her sometimes. They were 2 and 4 at the time. This was probably in 2019. Ooh, I ain't been around little ones in a long time. And I will say, I am ashamed to say some of those same phrases And sudden knee-jerk reactions were exactly what my parents did. And I had to apologize to a 2 and a 4-year-old and say, I'm sorry. And I'm, like, I didn't put my hands on them, but I said, like, I didn't listen to them and blamed them for something she didn't do. And she was really upset. She said, I'm not lying. And when she said that, I was like, damn it. That's exactly what I used to say as a kid. I'm not lying, because someone didn't believe me. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I believe you, And I did exactly what my parents did to me. And I didn't even think twice about it. And I said, wow, this is a lot harder than it looks. It's so much harder. You think you're going to do right, but sometimes you just have such a quick reaction. And you're like, oh, no, I got to stop and think myself before I react to a child.
Yes, that's very true.
I feel like you make such a good point with that too, that we expect these adult reactions from them. But then when they actually come to us with some kind of concern they have or something like that, we tell them to doubt themselves. And it's like, so it's like, if we're going to treat them like adults in one way, I like kind of a fun, like, this is just a funny thing for like in my family growing up. But my dad, when we were really little, he wanted, like, I was the firstborn. He wanted, like, when we had to go to the bathroom, to say, I have to urinate, as like a little baby. And it was kind of funny. My mom was like, they're not doing that. And it was just such a silly thing. He's like, well, they can learn the adult words. Where now with the dogs, he's like, you got to go potty. And like, just very much like they're little, but at the same time, and that's just like a silly example, but like they, with parents expecting the adult reactions and to like respond very maturely when you're like 4 or 5 years old, but then you're 4 or 5 years old and I'm like, you're having, hey, I feel this emotion because of this thing that happened. And they're like, well, you shouldn't, or no, you don't. And, or this didn't happen. It's so crazy how we we do both of those.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, Christina, congratulations. That is exciting. How far along are you?
4.5 months.
Woohoo!
That's why you see no pictures of me on social media. And this is why my face is growing as we continue to have these meetings.
Beautiful.
Thank you. I'm like, oh my goodness.
That is awesome. But yes, I want to talk about real quick. I don't know. Well, for you, definitely, Christina. I don't know if you follow my leak, but she has like the mommy and me thing where she talks about gentle parenting all the time. And I know that they just went on a vacation and she said like she got all dressed up to take her kids out. And then as soon as they got to the restaurant, the kids were screaming and acting a fool. And she's like, I just had to order our food to go. And she's like, and this is just gentle parenting because they're tired. Like you have to understand they've been in the pool all day. But some people won't react like that. And they'll be like, oh, get your ass over here. Like, give you something to cry about. But I'm so happy for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, God. That means it's my turn. Damn it.
Who's next?
And welcome, Yolanda. Ooh.
Hey, ladies.
Hey.
Sorry I missed the time.
That's okay. We switched it up a little bit today because of the hurricane.
Yeah.
But welcome. We're just diving into more generational trauma. And I just had a question for everyone based on basically this whole series and being able to just speak freely and transparently about everything that you've been through and having identified various areas in your life that fall under all of the categories that we talked about over the last few weeks. Has that made it easier for you to show empathy towards your parents or people in your life that may have hurt you? Anybody?
It depends on who it is. I've spoken previously about the women in my life. With my mom, yes, it has. I've definitely grown more empathetic towards her. I think we're just tied to each other in a certain way where I'm just not going to cut her off. I know I'm not going to do it. And she cares. She just has a way of showing it that's a little harsh or hard. She's hardened. But she surprises me sometimes. And I'm like, oh, that was very kind, Okay, I'm sometimes waiting for the other shoe to drop too. I'm like, well, it's coming, but my stepmom, no. Sometimes as you get older and you do become more empathetic, it makes you angrier when you realize how unnecessary some of the abusive tactics were. So, yeah.
Oh, well, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. And yes, I definitely agree about you and your mom. You definitely have that connection because even though my mom didn't raise me, I still was there for her and tried to, buy groceries for her and do little things for her because you just have that love. But I'm glad. Anybody else?
I would say for me, empathy has always been there, even before I knew what empathy was. But it hasn't changed the boundaries. The boundaries are something that I didn't define until recently in the last year. Very much necessary. And that's when it comes to like my mother. And like if she needed something, of course, regardless of our situation, I'm there to handle whatever it is. But the boundaries of our relationship will not change until I can see that she really wants to fix it, not, oh, I miss you, so let's start talking again, but go back into her same toxic, narcissistic ways. Like that can't happen anymore.
Understood. Keep those boundaries. They're important. Pam?
I am more empathetic. I think now, I mentioned a lot with my brother and my relationship with him. And it is, I really am at that phase where it's like, I love you. That's never changed. And I've helped, but I realize that I can't save you. Like, that's the thing. I can't want more for you than what you want for yourself. And so I am going to love you, but I've made the decision. I have my boundaries of getting a little bit better. Like, I feel like I'm getting a little bit more defined. It's a work in progress because I still feel sometimes that guilt with it because I'm like, I love my mom and I loved my grandfather, even though I know that the decisions that they made have created this situation with us, and with him and why he is the way that he is. But that's not my cross to bear. That's not and I have to stop trying to do everything in my power to make this person see me. That's something that I have really had to work on. Like, I can't make other people see the best in me. I just need to be my most authentic self. If he loves me, he's going to love me for me, whether I'm saving you or not saving you. So I am just making the decision to let him be in his situation. Even when I know you're lying to me, I've made the decision. I am not going to argue with you about you lying to me. That's just where you are. And I'm going to let you stay there. And I'm just going to make the decision to still love you and be empathetic to you, but I just won't be played by you.
Oh, preach, deaconess. Preach, girl.
Yeah. One time for the collection plate. No, I'm telling you.
Yeah, I need some practice with that for sure. The boundaries that's a challenge for me. But yeah, I think the more that I've been kind of doing this work, and I recently took like an unblocking your inner child course, just because I was noticing that there really is so much from childhood that was shaping decisions I was making, a lot of negative decisions and relationship decisions, and just even how I talk to myself that is really blocking me, I think, from reaching the next stages of my life and from getting some of the things that I want. And so, as I've been doing some of that work, I think it really has been kind of uncovering, and even just through meditation, just uncovering, hey, this is actually, again, like, the things that I blamed my parents for that they were fully, that they did are things that were, brought into their lives. It came from, the previous generation. And this is something that, has been in the family for a much longer time. And it didn't start with that. There's a book, I think It Didn't Start With You, that is on my Libby holds list. So eventually, because generational trauma is something that I think we're all realizing how much it's impacting us. So there is a very long way to the library for that book, but that it didn't start with our parents. It started so much longer ago. And so having the empathy for them that, hey, they, for the most part, they did what they could with what they had, and not necessarily everybody. I don't think that everybody is necessarily having the right intentions of, or necessarily deserves our forgiveness. But I think also, again, kind of as I mentioned, that forgiving them, or at least kind of recognizing in them what wounds came up in their lives and how that might have affected it. It doesn't make it okay. But if I kind of recognize that and give that space in my mind for that a little bit, then it helps me to move forward a little bit more. It doesn't matter what it does for the other people, but just kind of so that I'm not stuck. So it's helpful for me, but I think, that empathy. And then as I've gotten older and started to experience life in my own way, realizing, hey, things were not as black and white and things are not as cut and dry as they might seem. And maybe decisions were harder to make. But really seeing my grandparents living so close by and seeing those relationships and seeing my parents become the child again, that gave me a lot more empathy and understanding, I think, for what they went through.
That's awesome. I'm so glad. I'm glad that you guys are moving forward and growing through this series. That is awesome. I love it. Makes me happy. Okay. So bringing it back to grief though. So with always my mom, because I guess when you lose a parent, it's different than anybody else. So with my mom passing, because we didn't have a mom-daughter typical relationship, I didn't really know a whole lot about her or, my life as a baby before my dad got custody. But my dad was telling me one day, a couple weeks ago, that she had 2 miscarriages before they had me. And I was like, I had no idea. I'm like a miracle baby. That means I have to work even harder to be extra fabulous because, my siblings didn't make it. But I had thought about my life and I was just like, wow, I've had 2 miscarriages in my life. And that's just so odd. And I do feel like the next time I get pregnant, it'll be a successful pregnancy. But it's just the parallels of the generational, it doesn't even have to be trauma directly, directed at you, but just the parallels of the things that I've gone through in my life and, repeating even relational patterns with men that I realized reading things that my mom wrote after she passed, going through her documents and reading things like, oh my God, we were the same woman in a different, time frame. And it made me look at things differently and how I wanted to live my life and go about dating and, not having a fear-based fight or flight, running at the first sight of a flaw in somebody, just because that's just what I know. So I want to know how these conversations have changed you internally and emotionally, not how you deal with other people, but just you and how you deal with yourself and showing yourself self-love and just moving forward in your relationships and being a mommy. Yes, Yolanda.
I think for me, because this conversation happens in the season of healing, the season of growth, it confirmed that I am doing the work. I can feel the change as I start opening up to people. I'm trying to be more in my soft space. I'm trying to get there, and I realize what barriers still lay that's preventing me from getting there. What do I still need to work on? And it'll probably always be, as long as I'm living, a work in process. I'm going to always be working on it, but for the most part, it's shown me that I can give myself a little grace because I have grown. It showed me that as difficult as it is when you talk about grief is, I've lost some really close people, but I think the toughest grief or the toughest situation was grieving a living parent. Understanding that, if I'm being honest, I know my mother probably put in her will that I'm not even allowed at the funeral. If I'm being honest, that is the type of vindictive behavior, haha, I'll get the last laugh. So I have to be okay with that now so that whenever that happens, 20, whatever, how many years, it doesn't hit me like a rock and make me go backwards. Am I okay with it? Probably never will be okay with it, but I can deal with it. It doesn't, they might be moments, but it's not periods where I'm just so out of it that I can't function. I can't move through life. I can't do the things I need to do. It's a hard thing, but I think I'm at an age where we start questioning what we were told life should be like, what this should be, and what reality is, and just level setting ourselves and our expectations so that only thing I can control is myself. Give myself grace, do the healing I need to do so that I can be productive in any type of relationship, whether it's my kids, a significant other, friends, and just make me better.
Well, I know something you said in the first other conversation was you said a lot, my birth mother doesn't love me, so how can you? And I just want you to know that I love you.
Well, thank you.
And,
that's something I had to work on, though. It was a wall that I put up when it came to relationships. Like, my expectations were low.
Yeah.
Thank God I've worked on that.
Praise the Lord for growth.
Right.
Pamela, are you raising your hand?
Well, I was saying praise the Lord too, but no, I will say that having these conversations with you ladies has expanded me. I'm in my care phase of life. This is trying to get into my soft era as much as I can. And it has allowed me to be able to share my thoughts and emotions without fear. And I can see that coming across in other relationships that I have with my friends, or I even thinking going into personal relationships with, a partner. I've always struggled with being able to express myself to someone that I care about and ask questions and really absorb this person. But I find that it's easier now. Like, this is helping me feel like I can let my walls down and expand. And I know that that's what I needed in order to grow as a person on this journey, especially going into this season of my life, my golden renaissance or 50. This isn't a time for me to have to overanalyze my feelings and emotions. This is the time where you have to say what you want to say to people, because you don't have, not saying I'm going anywhere tomorrow, but time is not forever. So I don't want to waste moments with people. I want people to know clearly where I stand with you and how I feel about you, because I think that's what we deserve. And I'm at that place now where I can do that and not be afraid, because I know my discernment is there. I know I've done the work enough that I won't die. If something doesn't go the way I thought it would, I still can give love and be okay. So this has taught me and expanded me. So I'm very grateful for you ladies in these conversations.
Yay. I'm so happy. And that is true. And my dad, I noticed that he says a lot now, I love you, to like everybody, nieces, nephews, like children. And he never did that growing up. So yes, tell people how you feel.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my brother-in-law recently was saying to my sister, God, you guys say I love you way too much. But, I always think about it because my dad as a pilot, he was flying on 9/11, and I was a kid, and he and I got in a really dumb fight the night before. And, I didn't say I love you before he left. And now this is one of those things. Thank God he came home. He came home on my birthday, actually. And it's one of those things where I can't just hang up a phone call. I have to get out what I need to get out. It's very triggering for me if someone hangs up on me. I'm like, no, we need to clear this up right now. But I think also just these conversations and doing this work, it's given me so many more tools to put in my tool belt when the challenges do come up. Because it's something where I think if when I'm not being totally objective, I will blame all of the world's problems on myself. Every world war, I caused it. I had something to do with it. And and it's given me, even from a spiritual perspective, I ended up reading, Rabbi Kushner wrote the book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. And it's not just for, for the Jewish tradition. And we've actually given it to a lot of Christian friends as well when they're going through something, but I think when I've kind of told myself that these things, it's not because I was chosen to go through some horrible challenge. It's because, it's random. it's going to happen, but I can, look within myself or look to a greater power to find the strength to get through it. And instead of necessarily blaming myself for it or blaming, well, this thing kind of happens to me, kind of just instead trying to find like, hey, this shouldn't have happened to me. This sucks. But what meaning can I take from it? So even, having been, for example, in the toxic relationships, now what I try to do is I volunteer for the domestic abuse organization in Central Florida, and I've gotten really involved with as much volunteer work and awareness as I can for them, for that resource out there, because I know that it can help people who are in an even worse situation than what I went through. And so seeing where I can find the meaning in it. And I think by having the conversations and being vulnerable with one another and recognizing that other people are going through what I've gone through, and recognizing again that this didn't have to happen to me. It wasn't that I was chosen to have some horrible situation, but that I can find some meaning in it, and I can try to bring some good to it for the next person. I think that helps me a lot when I'm kind of down and thinking about it.
Absolutely. Christina?
Well, I'm doing a dance. I've come a long way. I got a long way to go. But I have found I'm in a sweet spot where I'm at peace. I've gotten rid of the people who I needed to get rid of in a way, or not associate with. And that has given me space to really work on myself more and see more areas that I want to work on, see myself better, less drama, but also, like Yolanda said, it's constant. Like now that I'm having a baby, it's brushing up some old wounds. And I'm like, what if I am like my mom? It's little voices coming up, and I'm like, how can I prevent that? And what if this, what if that? And I'm like, oh gosh, I need a couple book recommendations or need a little bit of guidance here. But yeah, it's a dance. I've come a long way. I'm very proud of myself. I'm much more confident. I'm much more outspoken when it comes to, speaking up, standing up for myself. I wasn't able to do that for a very long time. Yeah, so I'm just doing a dance a little bit. Right now in this soft life era, it's a little harder than I thought to relax and enjoy it, because you beat yourself up a little bit and you're like, I should be working. I should be doing something else. I should be productive. And you're like, no, this is intentional rest. Like you're doing this to rest in all aspects. But even in that rest, I'm like, so what are you working on internally? And I do feel like, all right, I'm growing organs for another person. But also with that, I do feel like, although my soft life era, I feel like, I'm resting. I've lost a little bit of my old habits that I kind of got in shape, like discipline. My days are a little free, and I've kind of gotten out of some routines that were helpful to me. So I'm a little like, oh no, I got to figure out how to find my way back to that, because now I'm kind of unstructured here. So it's a little bit of a dance, and as new things present themselves, it's going to show new areas you got to work on. So,
or you can just grieve the past structure and understand you're going to have a new structure going forward.
Exactly. And a lot of unlearning, having to walk away from your job by choice and deciding to do something like this. That means I changed my mind on how I wanted everything to look. I wanted to be a working woman. I wanted to be a working mom. I wanted to do all these things. And I stepped back and said, I don't want those things anymore. Nobody understands what I'm doing. Everyone's like my sister-in-law was like, so what do you do all day? She asked me that the other week. And I said, nothing. I don't do anything, and she's like, oh yeah, I know no one understands this, but I've had to unlearn and constantly remind myself why I'm doing what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And I don't even try to explain it to people now.
They don't need to understand it.
They don't.
And you are doing the opposite of what your mother.
Yes, I am. I'm like, in that aspect, I was at some point when I did end up with when she had custody of me, I was a latchkey kid. And I don't want that. If I can help it a little bit, if you got to do what you got to do, that's fine. But I'm like, I had friends or people I knew who had family at home. It might not have been their parents, but someone had like hot food waiting for them. Someone had someone caring for them at home too, whether it was a grandparent or something. And I was always like, man, what is that like? Once again, it's the sitcom life in my head of like, what is that like? And I'm like, well, I get to be that, maybe I can, at least for the first year. I'll take off for the first year at least. But I'm really going to fight hard to be present a lot more than what I've had, so lots of unlearning too.
Well, that's amazing. I'm so excited for all of you, and I'm so happy to have done this series with you ladies. It's been a blessing, and I just want to thank you all so much.
Thank you for the vision.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. This has been amazing. So thank you, my dear.
No problem.
So I guess that's a wrap, y'all.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a wrap on the Fallen to Self series. So I'll make sure we have the link in the show notes. And we will talk to y'all soon. Bye.
Bye, y'all.